am very happy to have our two guests aboard, as we've got Mark Drumheller. He does amazing work over at Yahoo Sports, and Colby Dant, who does terrific work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. And gentlemen, let's talk some XFL. And before we take a look at the remainder of the games that we've got for week 2, I want to get your thoughts on what we did see on Thursday night, as the St. Louis Battlehawks won off as 4-point underdogs in most spots, landed right next to the total. I was seeing 38.5 in a lot of spots, lands 38. But Colby, what were your thoughts on the Battlehawks? Because they won the turnover battle, and they just barely squeaked this one out for pretty much a second straight week.
I think they're the luckiest team in the XFL ever. But they got outgained the turnover battle. Yeah, they made the right plays at the right time. I was shocked at some of the play calling from the Sea Dragons. From an offensive standpoint, the 3-point conversion, I still don't believe in going for the 3-point conversion. But the Battlehawks somehow get out of there. They're 2-0, and both of those games happening on the road. But I do think there's value probably right now in hopping in on a Seattle future, because they severely outgained, both opponents. And if they can just protect the football, they'd be winning these games. And I don't know if Danucci's the right answer or they go with Steven Montez, but I just feel like this team is better than their 0-2 record. And I feel like they should probably be 2-0.
Yeah, it's been so interesting to take a look at this bunch, because with the Battlehawks, they had that big giant comeback where they were losing for 58 minutes in week number 1, and they come back, rally in this one. You had a field goal that came up short as well for the Seattle Sea Dragons. Mark, what did you make out of the game that we saw on Thursday?
Yeah, I think, the question coming in is Seattle really let the game get away from them in week 1, the same way with turnovers, and were they going to be able to kind of clean that up this week? And, the answer was no. And, I think it's a little bit concerning, and it's going to start with the quarterback, Ben DiNucci. And granted, he fumbled the ball at the 1-yard line with the game on the line last week. And then, he fumbles it again on a quarterback sneak this week. And there's other players making mistakes. It's not just him. They had a muff punt, but they really need to tighten up the ball security. And I think they'll be just fine. Again, from, I think they had 6 yards per play tonight, which is, a ton, especially in this league. You got games that are scoring around 40 points per game. So I think that if they can figure something out at the quarterback and take care of the ball security, they're going to be a threat. I mean, I played a little plus 700, on their futures before, the games went off tonight, and might even be able to get a better number later. But I think that they need to figure out an answer quick, because, they're going to run out of time. There's only 10 games, so they got to start winning.
And how much do you think that this played a little bit of a factor as well? Because with the XFL and the way that it is set up, I feel like home field is a little bit diminished, because all these teams, they're sort of based out in a hub in the state of Texas. As a matter of fact, I think that they actually travel pretty much on the same flights as each other as well. How much do you have to take a look at that in terms of gauging home field in the XFL? I'll start with you on this, Colby.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think there's a couple locations. DC, we saw with the lemons that came out on the field, and I grew up in DC, and I think more lemons are coming. That's an environment where I actually think there's a home edge. I expect St. Louis to be the same, especially the fact they're 2-0 and the way they won, and the fact that they've been deprived of any football. And if you go back to the last XFL, they had a great fan turnout. I think San Antonio might be good, but you make a good point on some of the other cities. Houston seemed all right. Dallas didn't, or Arlington, I guess, didn't have really anybody. Orlando, I don't expect a big turnout. Seattle, this one could have been the weather too, but I don't know. I feel like there's about three home locations that I trust that could actually give you an edge, but the rest, the other 5 teams, probably not so much.
And do you make anything out of this, Mark? Because I did think that it was very interesting, and I do think that the weather played a little bit of a factor in this game as well, because typically when you've got weather games like this, if you have a team that is based out in the Midwest or something like that, you get a snowy day. Teams that are practicing in it, they're going through it all week long, going up against a team that's down south. I always think that provides an advantage to the home team a little bit more. In this case, with these teams practicing out there in Texas, there's no advantage to be had by either team.
Yeah, you get the crowd advantage, but, we know in betting the NFL, the real home field advantage is the travel disadvantage that the other teams have, right? From going and playing on the road 2 weeks. Like, for instance, like St. Louis, we talked about them being the luckiest team. they start the season with 2 road games. They get outplayed in both of them. They end up with 2 wins. And now they go back to Arlington and the hub, and then they're going to come home for their first home opener next week, 2-0. But, those back-to-back road games aren't the same when everybody's coming back to the hub anyway. So, I do think that the advantage is diminished a little bit. I agree with Colby. I think, San Antonio, St. Louis, those domes or those small compact stadiums like they have in D.C., are going to be where you see the home field advantage. I'll be interested to see the turnout in Vegas. Small stadium as well. I think it fits only like 12,000. So, there's an opportunity. The way it's constructed makes me think there won't be a huge home field advantage, but I'll be interested to see what that looks like this weekend.
And Mark will head to you for that Vegas game, as on Saturday it's going to be the Vegas Vipers and the DC Defenders. Vegas finds themselves as a 3-point favorite. Lowest total on the board. We're finding it at a 35.5 as I'm seeing it in most spots. What do you make out of this game? Because certainly it's a case in which DC has been just a very fascinating team, to say the least. For DC, I do think that they leave a little bit of something to be desired on the offensive side of things. And for Vegas, I feel like they're a team that they're going to need to kick it up a little bit more with their offense as well. I have my question marks with Luis Perez.
Yeah, so that's the key here, right? So you look at Vegas, and, I thought they moved the ball well. Had 3 touchdowns against against Arlington. But, the second half, they kind of fell apart, right? They had 2 pick sixes. And, can they clean up those mistakes? Well, if Seattle's a barometer, I'm not sure that they can clean it up from week to week. So you have to watch out for that. I played some DC here plus the points just because I feel like, even though their offense is pretty limited, they averaged the league low 3.3 yards per play in week 1, still ended up winning the game, against Seattle because of Seattle's mistakes. So now they play the same type of team here against Vegas. And, to me, I just think it's probably going to be a close competitive game. I think the Defenders' defense keeps them in it. Vipers might come out with the win, but I just think the 3.5 points was pretty valuable.
I do think so as well. And Colby, where do you stand on the game that we're going to be seeing on Saturday between DC and Vegas?
I like the Defenders. I like them to win it outright too. I think they probably have the best defense, even on roster standpoint. When I looked at the roster preseason, I thought this is one of the more talented, defensive units. And they showed up against Seattle. Now they're calling for rain in this game. This is not in the Raider Stadium. This is at the baseball stadium there. So I think that favors DC's game. I think they're going to run the ball more, and keep an eye on De'Aaron King to get more touches. I thought he was electric in the first match. Showed flashes in the Seattle game. I expect them to go to him more, and I think that Luis Perez has played solid, but I think the defense of the Defenders will have opportunity to slow him down, especially if you're telling me there's elements like rain.
And you've got On the Boots reporting with regards to the weather as well. I jog every day in the lovely city of Las Vegas. Actually, it's technically Henderson where I jog, but we're right there in the same vicinity. I have seen snow 3 times in the last 25 days on my jog. So I can confirm that we are actually getting some colder weather out here in lovely Las Vegas / lovely Henderson, Nevada. So I can tell you right now, it has been very, very interesting. And I do take a look at this. We'll start with you, Mark, and then after the break, we'll get your thoughts on this one, Colby. The Brahmas and the Orlando Guardians. The Guardians are a 3.5-point home underdog, and I think that they are very worthy of being so because Paxton Lynch, I think, is by far the worst quarterback in this league.
Yeah, so, Lynch is out of there. They're probably going to go with Dormady, or maybe we'll see a little Francois as well. But, Orlando, I think I played under in this game just because I think when you look at San Antonio and how they play, they want to run the football, really conservative on offense with Jack Cohn. And the strength of their team is really their defensive line, right? We saw them wreck St. Louis's offense in week 1. And now they're going up against a Guardians offensive line that allowed 7 sacks to Houston. So I think their defense will really set the tone in this game. And then, of course, if they do get the lead, they're going to be run heavy. So I expect this one to go under the 38.5.
And Colby, I threw this out to Mark just before the end of the last segment, and now I'll throw out you the same question. Let's take a look at this game between the Guardians and the San Antonio Brahmas. Brahmas are going to be a road favorite of 3.5 points. I'm seeing currently at DraftKings. Total is 38.5. Where do you stand on this game? Because week number 1 with Paxton Lynch was a complete and utter failure for the Orlando Guardians. So no doubt about it. I'm sure that they went back to the drawing board this week and are going to be trying to come up with something different and or a guy not named Paxton Lynch under center.
Well, it's relieving to hear that because, in any sport or in any version of football, it's good to fade Paxton Lynch. Yeah. But I was surprised because I thought DeAndre Francois was going to be the guy. I watched him at Florida State. I thought he was really talented. I thought he had a chance at the NFL. I know things ended weird there and he ended up at Hampton, but I from what I heard that he might get the start here. If not, we're going to see both him and Dormandy, the former Tennessee Vols QB. But I think if Francois gets the go, I do think he's really talented. And the offense actually moved the ball some. It's almost like the Seattle story. They just turned the ball over too many times. Meanwhile, San Antonio, easily the best rushing attack in the league. I think until I know the quarterback situation, I got to take San Antonio minus the points. But if you're telling me Francois is getting the starts, I could see myself jumping over to Orlando. I'm probably going to wait until right before kickoff to bet this one. But right now, give me the Brahmas.
Yep, with San Antonio, I do think that Hines Ward is actually proving himself to be a relatively okay coach as well. I wasn't necessarily sure what to expect out of him. You knew that he'd be loving his players and everything like that, but you just didn't know what you'd be able to get out of him in terms of an X's and O's. So far, so good on that front. This is the other game that we're going to be seeing on Sunday, the Arlington Renegades. They're going to be playing against the Houston Roughnecks. It is going to be in Houston, and Houston is a 5-point favorite, and out of all the teams that we saw week number 1, Houston probably had the best showing. They went out there, they completely dump trucked the Orlando Guardians, who once again, they were starting Paxton Lynch, so it comes with a little bit of an asterisk there. But where do you stand, Mark, in terms of Roughnecks versus Arlington in the battle for the great state of Texas?
Yeah, I bet Houston immediately here at minus 3.5, and I would still even play them at this number. I mean, listen, 5 sounds like an eternity in this league, right? 4 of the 5 games have been decided by 4 or 5 points, but I really think there's a big gap between these two teams. I've been really off market on Arlington since the start, and I haven't seen anything last week that would kind of make me think that I'm wrong. Like, I just think they're one of the worst teams in the league. You look at that offense, they don't have an answer at quarterback with Flitt. And, Kyle Sloter's not much of an upgrade if they bring him in. They ran the ball like 30 times for 80 yards. They're the only team in the XFL that didn't get an offensive touchdown last week. They won the game because, they got 2 defensive touchdowns and, a ton of fumbles and, it was like a muffed kind of like punt. But, offensively really struggling. And I think that, the fact that they won last week kind of masks that and allows us to get it like, a short number, at least at the open on Houston here, who, again, offense looks really smooth. Run and shoot offense with A.J. Smith, who's a June Jones disciple. They're like the Sea Dragons without the turnovers, right? They got shifty backs. They get the ball in space. They move down the field. They had 7 sacks last week against Orlando. How much of that is Orlando's offensive line? How much of that is Wade Phillips' defense? Probably a mix of both, but I think they have the weapons here to get the job done. I think they're going to win, pretty handily again this week, against an Arlington team that I just think is very overrated in the market.
Yep, I do think that it's so interesting to take a look at these two teams. And with Houston, they were able to have a nice showing in week 1. Colby, do you think that they're going to be able to continue it here in week 2 as a 5-point favorite?
I'm fading them. I think they're overvalued because they're playing Orlando. Or because they beat Orlando in the fashion they did. I thought Bob Stoops made great second half adjustments, obviously on the defensive side of the ball. I know they weren't juggernauts on the offensive side of the ball, but I do think Kyle Sloter is going to get some action in this game. Wouldn't be surprised if he started this game. And remember, Sloter and Sal Cannella, the tight end, they were both with the New Orleans Breakers in the USFL last year. They had great chemistry. I think that's something that can kickstart this offense. I like the points. I even like a potential money line play here.
Yep, I think that it's so interesting to take a look at all these teams in the XFL. And Mark, I want to get your thoughts on this as well, because you mentioned something that I think is so intriguing. We've only seen 1 out of the 5 XFL games land on a number that is north of 4. We've been seeing these games be very, very tight-knit. How much do you take a look at these spreads in the XFL, and how much value do you think there is on some of these numbers that are going to be very wonky? Because as we know, you're able to go for 1, 2, or 3. So Typically in the NFL, your critical numbers are 3, 7. If you get up a little bit north of that, more around 10. How much do you think that there is going to be more of a value on, say, like a 3.5 as opposed to a 4? Because I do think that this league lends itself to more interesting finishes and not as many games landing on 3 and 7, but rather some of those numbers like a 2, like a 4.
Yeah, I do think, it's almost like the 2 might be the new 3, right? We've seen a lot of 2-point results so far. And, when you look at the, conversions, I think it's going to take a little while for the coaches to figure it out, right? We've saw, some of the coaches like, Houston went for the 1-point conversion, all 4 touchdowns they scored. They didn't convert any of them, right? The 1-point conversion has been the least effective, 1 for 7 so far, it with a 14-point success rate, while the 3-point conversion has been the most successful, 3 for 6 for a 50% success rate. So I think you're going to see the coaches realize that it's better to be more aggressive and go for these 2s and more 3s, which is going to kind of like, mess with the key numbers, right? But I think, what we're seeing is very competitive games, with very short margins of victory. So I think that's going to really compact the lines. We're going to see some short spreads, especially considering the fact that the home field advantage is less because they're not traveling. They have the same travel schedule. So I think all those factors kind of play into it, but I think the 2 is kind of the new 3 here in the XFL.
So many good points there, and same question to you, Colby. How do you gauge these spreads, and how much you have to get out of the mindset of, hey, the 3 is a critical number as the 7 is a critical number? Because I just take a look at the XFL right now, and I do think that it requires a little bit of a different thought process when it comes to gauging spreads rather than just the default NFL model.
Oh, 100%. I mean, tonight I had Seattle minus 2.5. I got the line very early, but still they're in a spot here where June Jones and I know he had previously said that he was going to go for 3 every time. I didn't expect him to go for 3 right there. I was going crazy. That wouldn't have mattered apparently with the maybe if he got the 3. But yeah, I mean, I'm out of practice. I'm learning as the weeks go, and I think Mark hit the nail on the head there. With 2 is probably the 3, as regarding to betting on college football or the NFL. The way we value 3, I think 2 is probably the correct way to do that because I've gotten burned now a couple times on these 2.5s.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.